This feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies.
I'm not cold.
Now, Mr. Hale, before we move things about, you explain to Mr. Henderson just what you saw when you came here yesterday morning.
By the way, has anything been moved or things just as you left them yesterday?
It's just the same. When it dropped below zero last night, I thought I'd better send Frank out this morning to make a fire for us. No use getting pneumonia with a big case on, but I told him not to touch anything except the stove, and you know Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. When I had to send Frank to Morris Center for that man who went crazy. I want you to know I had my hands full yesterday. I knew you could get back from Omaha by today, and as long as I went over everything here myself.
Well, Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning.
Well, Harry and I had started to town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place and I got here and I said, I'm going to see if I can't get John Wright to go in with me on a party telephone. I spoke to Mr. Wright about it once before and he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked was peace and quiet. I guess you know about how much he talks to himself, but I thought maybe if I went to the house and talked about it before his wife, I could talk some sense into him.
Let's talk about that later, Mr. Hale. I do want to talk about that, but now just tell what happened when you got to the house.
I didn't hear or see anything. I knocked at the door and still it was all quiet inside. I knew they must be up. It was past 8 o'clock, so I knocked again and I thought I heard someone say, "Come in." I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet, but I opened the door, this door. And there on the rocker sat Mrs. Wright.
What was she doing?
She was rocking back and forth and she had her apron in her hand and was kind of pleating it.
And how did she look?
Well, she looked queer.
How do you mean, queer?
As if she didn't know what she was going to do next and kind of done up.
How did she seem to feel about your coming?
Why, I don't think she minded one way or another. I didn't pay much attention, or she didn't pay much attention. I said, "How do you do, Mrs. Wright? It's cold, ain't it?" And she said,
Isn't it?
and went on kind of pleating at her apron. Well, I was surprised. She didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, "I want to see John." And then she laughed, and I guess you would call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, "Can't I see John?"
No.
She says, kind of dull like. "Ain't he home?" says I.
Yes.
Says she.
He's home.
"Then why can't I see him?" I asked her, out of patience.
'Cause he's dead.
She says. "Dead," says I. She just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. "Why, where is he?" says I, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs like that. I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from there to here, then I says, "Why, what did he die from?"
He died of a rope around his neck.
Says she, and just went on pleating at her apron. Well, I went out and called Harry. I thought I might need help. We went upstairs, and there he was, lying.
Oh, I think I'd rather have you go into that upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story.
Well, my first thought was to get off that rope. It looked. But Harry, he went up to him and he says, "No, he's dead all right, and we better not touch anything." So we went back downstairs. She was still sitting that same way. "Has anybody been notified?" I asked.
No.
She said, unconcerned. "Who did this, Mrs. Wright?" said Harry. He said it businesslike, and she stopped pleating her apron.
I don't know.
She says. "You don't know," says Harry.
No.
Says she. "Weren't you sleeping on the bed with him?" says Harry.
Yes.
Says she.
But I was on the inside.
"Somebody slipped a rope round his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up?" says Harry.
I didn't wake up.
She said after him. We must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she said.
I sleep sound.
Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell the story first to the coroner or the sheriff, so Harry went fast as he could to the Rivers place where there's a telephone.
And what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew you had gone for the coroner?
She moved from that chair to this one over here, and just sat there with her hands held together and looking down. I got a feeling that I ought to make some conversation, so I Said I had come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone, and at that she started to laugh. Then she stopped and looked at me, scared. I don't know, maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Soon Harry got back, and then Dr. Lloyd came, and you, Mr. Peters. So I guess that's all I know that you don't.
I guess we'll go upstairs first, then out to the barn and around there. You're convinced there's nothing important here, nothing that would point to any motive?
Nothing here but kitchen things.
Here's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit. It did freeze. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break.
Well, you could beat the woman, help for murder, and worrying about her preserves.
I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying over trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the ladies? Dirty towels. Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
There is a great deal much work to be done on a farm.
To be sure, and yet, I know there are some Dixon County farmhouses which do not have such roller towels.
Those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they should be.
Ah, loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends, too.
I haven't seen her much of her late. I haven't been in this house in more than a year.
And why was that? You didn't like her?
I liked her well enough. It's just farmers' wives they have their hands full, and Miss Sanderson, and then,
Yes.
well, it never seemed a very cheerful place.
No, it's not cheerful. I shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know if Wright had either.
You mean they didn't get on very well?
No, I don't mean anything, but I don't think a place would be any more cheerful for John Wright's being in it.
I'd like to talk more of that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now.
I suppose anything Miss Peters does will be all right. She was taking some clothes for her, and a few little things. We left in such a hurry yesterday.
Yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters, and keep an eye out for anything that might be of use to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
I would hate to have men coming into my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Duty's all right, but I guess that deputy sheriff that came out here to make a fire must have got a little on him. I wish I'd thought of that sooner. It seems mean to talk about her for not having things all slicked up when she had to leave in such a hurry.
She had a bread set.
Oh, she was going to put this here, and it is a shame about her fruit. I wonder if it's all gone. I think there is some here that's all right, Mrs. Peters. Yes, here, and this is cherries, too. Oh, I declare, I believe it's the only one. She'll feel awful bad after all her hard work in the hot weather. I remember the afternoon where I put my cherries up last summer.
Well, I must get those things from the front room closet. You coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You can help me carry them. It's cold in there.
Well, Wright was close. I think that's maybe why she kept so much for herself. She didn't even belong to the Ladies' Aid. I suppose she felt like she couldn't do her part, and then you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be so lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the girls down singing in the choir, but that was 30 years ago. This all you was going to take in?
Well, she said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, for there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. But I suppose just to make her feel more natural. She said they was in the top drawer in this cupboard. Yes, here. And then her little shawl she always hung behind the door. Why, yes, here it is.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
Do you think she did it?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did it. Asking for her apron and her little shawl and worrying about her fruit.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson is awful sarcastic in his speech, and he'll make fun of her saying she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake up when they were slipping that rope around his neck.
No, it's strange. It must have been done awful crafty, and still, they say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that.
That's just what Mr. Hale said. And there was a gun in the house. He said that's what he couldn't understand.
Well, Mr. Henderson said that what was needed for the case was a motive, something to show anger or a sudden feeling.
Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. It's wiped over here. I wonder how they're finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little more slick up there. It seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to send against her.
But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
I suppose it is. You better listen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel it when you get out.
She was piercing a quilt.
It's log cabin pattern. It's pretty, isn't it? I wonder if she was just gonna quilt it or knot it.
They wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
Frank's fire didn't do much up there, did it? Well, let's go out to the barn and get that cleared up.
I don't know if it's so strange, just taking up our time with little things while they're waiting to get our evidence. I don't see if it's anything to laugh about.
Of course, they've got awful important things on their minds.
Mrs. Peters, look at this one. Here, this is the one she was working on, and look at the sewing. All the rest has been so nice and even, but look at this. It's all over the place. Well, it looks like she didn't know what she was about.
Oh, what are you doing, Mrs. Hale?
I'm just pulling out a stitch or two that wasn't so very good. Bad sewing always makes me fidgety.
I don't think we ought to touch things.
I'll just finish up the end. Mrs. Peters?
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
What do you suppose she was so nervous about?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know as to why she was nervous. I sometimes sew awful queer when I'm just tired. Well, I must get these things wrapped up. They may be through sooner than we think. I wonder where I could find a piece of paper and some string.
In that cupboard, maybe?
Why, here's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale?
Well, I don't know whether she did or not. I haven't been here in so long, but there was a man last summer selling canaries cheap. I don't know if she took one or not, though. She used to sing real pretty herself.
Seems funny to think of a bird round here. But she must have had one, or why would she have the cage? I wonder what happened to it.
Well, I suppose maybe the cat got it?
Oh, no, she didn't have a cat. She's got that feeling some people have about cats, being afraid of them. My cat got into her room and she got real upset and asked me to take it out.
My sister Bessie was like that. It's queer, ain't it?
Why, look at this door. It's broke. The hinges pulled apart.
Well, it looks like someone's been rough with it.
Yes.
I do wish if they would find any evidence, they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
But I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would be so lonesome for me sitting here by myself.
It would, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come over here sometimes when she was here. I wish I had.
But of course you were awful busy, Mrs. Hale, with your house and your children.
I could have come. I stayed away because it wasn't cheerful, but I suppose that's why I should have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe it's because it's down in a hollow and you can't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place. It always has been. I wish I had come over here to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
Well, you mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Sometimes we just don't see how it is with other folks until something comes up.
Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house, and with Wright out all day at work and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
No, I've seen him in town. They say he was a good man.
Yes, good. And he didn't drink, and he kept his word as well as most, I guess. He paid his debts, but he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him was like raw wind, just straight to the bone. I should think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose happened to it?
I don't know, unless it got sick and died.
You weren't raised around here, were you? You didn't know her?
Not till they brought her yesterday.
Well, come to think of it, she was a bit like a bird herself. She was real sweet and pretty, but really timid and fluttery. How she did change. I'll tell you what, Miss Peters. Why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind.
I think that's a real nice idea, Mrs. Hale. They couldn't possibly have any objection to it, could there? Now, what would I take? I wonder. Oh, I wonder if her patches are in here and her things.
Oh, here's some red. Oh, I expect that this has got her sewing things in it. Wow, what a pretty box. It looks like something someone would give you. Maybe her scissors are in here. Why? Oh, there's something wrapped in silk.
Oh, that is not her scissors.
Oh, Mrs. Peters,
It's the bird.
But Miss Peters, look at it. Look at its neck. It's all to the other side.
Someone wrung its neck.
Well, ladies, have you decided whether she was going to quilt it or not it?
We think she was going to knot it.
Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Has the bird flown?
We think that the cat got it.
Is there a cat?
Well, not now. They're superstitious, you know. They leave.
No sign at all of anyone having come from the outside. Their own rope. Now, let's go up again and go over it piece by piece. Would have had to been someone who knew just the...
She liked the bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box.
When I was a girl, my kitten, there was a boy took a hatchet and before my eyes, before I could get there. If they hadn't held me back, I would have hurt him.
I do wonder how it would seem with no children around. No, Wright wouldn't like a bird, something that sang. She used to sing, and he killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
I knew John Wright.
It was an awful thing done in this house. That night, Mrs. Hale, killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck and choking the life out of him.
Choked the life right out of him. If there'd been years and years of nothing but a bird to sing to you, it would be awful still after the bird was gone.
I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota and my first baby died after he was 2 years old and no other at the time.
How soon do you think they'll be through? Looking for evidence?
I know what stillness is. The law has got to punish crime, Mrs. Hale.
I wish you'd seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress and those blue ribbons and stood up in the choir and sang. I wish I'd come around here once in a while. That was a crime. That was a crime. Who's going to punish that?
We mustn't take on.
I should have known she needed help. I know how things can be for women, and I'll tell you, it's queer, Mrs. Peters. We live close together and we live far apart, but we all go through the same things. It's all just a different kind of the same thing. And if I was you, I wouldn't tell her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right. Take this to prove it to her. She may never know if it was broke or not.
It's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they just laugh, getting all stirred up over a little thing like a dead canary, as if that could have anything to do with. Wouldn't they laugh?
Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't.
No, Peters, it's all perfectly clear except a reason for doing it. You know how juries are when it comes to women. If there was some definite thing, something to show, something to make a story about, a thing that would connect up with this strange way of doing it.
Well, I've got the team around. Pretty cold out there.
I'm going to stay here for a while by myself. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything. I'm not satisfied that we can't do better.
Do you want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in?
Oh, I guess they're not very dangerous things the ladies have picked out. No, Mrs. Peters doesn't need any supervising. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters?
Not just that way.
Married to the law. I just want you to come in here a minute, George. We ought to take a look at these windows.
Oh, windows!
We'll be right out, Mr. Hale.
Well, Henry, at least we found out she was not going to quilt it. She was going to... What was it you called it, ladies?
We call it not it, Mr. Henderson.